Chapter 5. No Quarter. The mood as they rode was taut. Not nervous, no one among the Humoi would dare show nerves, but focused. Grim. Purposeful. Fira rode a few paces ahead of Alex, her blonde hair braided for battle, her bow slung across her back, her posture telegraphing assurance in the saddle. Her battle-wear was all function, leathers mobile at joints, loose at shoulders and hips for mobility. But there was no mistaking how it framed her form. Strong, lithe. Everything about her moved with the smooth economy of someone born to hunt, to fight, to survive. Alex caught himself watching, not in the way a man might idly admire a pretty girl on the tube, but something more primal, more immediate. This world bred people to their peak, or killed them. No softness here, no sedentary comfort. Even the smallest motion in her legs as the horse shifted beneath her was a study in sculpted flesh. His gaze flicked away quickly. Not the time, not the place. Still, part of him wondered if a woman like her would eat him alive. Probably. It would be a hell of a way to go, though. Then, all pleasant daydreams fled. The Morlock pit came into view. A scar in the earth. The tree line thinned around a collapsed depression. Half-natural cave, half-excavated warren. Black stone formed crude ramps and ledges spiraling down into shadow. Tendrils of some sickly hanging plant festooned the arch of the cave. Bone piles littered the perimeter, bleaching in the sunlight. Animal bones mostly, but some looked human, too. A heavy stink rolled up, wet fur, rotted meat. Nothing good. The horses reared. Haska reined in. "We tether here," he said low. "The horses don't like the smell." The horses were left behind. Alex checked his gear one last time. Sidearm chambered, spare mags in his vest. He spared a thought for the shotgun and M4 back at the Time Rider. They would have been useful here. He made a quiet mental note. "I go nowhere dangerous again without heavier firepower. Uncle Charlie taught me better." The Humoi fanned out naturally, bows strung, axe in hand, moving like a hunting pack. No formation, just instinct. They entered the gaping maw of the cave, throwing burning torches ahead of themselves every so often to light the way and picking them up again. They passed through caverns carpeted with unmistakably human bones, but still no Morlock resistance. The hair on the back of Alex's neck was upright like 1,000 little antennae, broadcasting, "Danger, go no further!" to his nervous system. Sandor walked near the rear, hands loose at his sides, eyes half-lidded. His mind was somewhere else. Or everywhere else. George glanced back at him. "You ready?" Sandor's voice was cool. "Ready." A glance passed between George and Alex. Tense, loaded. Something about Sandor was off, too calm, too cold. And they were right. The first Morlocks broke from the gloom, thin-limbed blue and chalk-skinned things with red, slick eyes, jaws full of ragged teeth. They howled, charging. Alex was almost unmanned. These things could move! What the hell was he doing here in this nightmare? The Humoi let fly with arrows which went screaming past Alex's ears, slicing into pale blue meat, felling two before the beasts closed the gap. Their infernal siren call was wailing, unnerving to Alex, but interfering with all of the Humoi on a psychic level. A Morlock came at Alex before he had time to go for his gun. He dodged its reckless advance, and it went down under a threshing hell of Humoi axes. The melee turned ugly fast, screams, clangs of blades, wet impacts. Alex drew his sidearm and fired. The first round cracked through a Morlock's head, neat, efficient, instantaneous. It skidded and dropped like a puppet with its strings cut. The entire battlefield stalled. The sound was alien here. Sharp, violent in a way this era wasn't built for, and echoed deafeningly in the cavern. The Humoi flinched back instinctively, half staring at Alex. Even the Morlocks faltered, confused, until a third round dropped 2 more. Then confusion turned to fear. Suddenly the Humoi surged, emboldened. They were pressing forward, gaining advantage. Then Sandar stepped forward. His eyes flared, subtle, but Alex caught it. An invisible ripple of pressure radiating out in a sphere. Mercifully, the shrieking wail of Morlock sirens squelched into silence. Alex blinked. "Did you—" "Keep shooting, cousin." Sandar replied, voice level. "I'm not done yet." And he wasn't. At the corner of the cavern, a Morlock was grappling a young Humoi fighter. Sandar turned his gaze, his brow furrowed, not in strain, but focus. The Morlock spasmed, its limbs locked, then folded in on themselves with a sickening crunch. It collapsed in a heap, unmoving. Alex saw it. So did George. Neither had time to comment. The pit fight surged toward its climax. Alex found himself shoulder to shoulder with Fira. An arrow split a Morlock's throat, but a second lunged from the flank. She spun, too slow. He was faster. The 9mm barked once, twice. The Morlock's head vanished in a mist of red and bone. Fira blinked at him. Surprise, shock, something else tangled there. "You all right?" he snapped, already scanning for the next target. "Fine," she muttered. "Didn't need—" But her voice lacked conviction. She had needed it. And she knew it. Together they pressed forward. Then they reached the breeding pits. It was worse than anything Alex had imagined. The cavern widened into a slick, fetid hollow. Figures, women, hung suspended from rough harnesses of sinew and rope, limbs bound, bellies distended grotesquely. Some were Eloi, some Humoi, some impossible to tell anymore. Others lay discarded in corners, emptied, broken. Bones cracked from within, bodies slumped in death poses where Morlocks hadn't bothered to move them, and above them, hanging from the ceiling, were foul, veiny, teardrop-shaped sacks of various sizes. Eloi were being made to gestate these horrors, and then they were hung out in some kind of second larval stage of development. Morlocks moved among them, tending them, and there was movement of limbs inside. The scientific minds within Alex and George both recognized what was the full horror of the Morlock reproductive cycle. It wasn't just an abattoir, it was a factory. George stood frozen. His hands trembled. His eyes, those sharp, calculating eyes, glassed over. "This," he croaked. "This was—" He didn't finish. Didn't have to. This was Wiener's fate? Alex's heart broke for his uncle. He stared at the atrocities all around, fists clenching so hard the joints ground together. His breath came in ragged shudders. His mind flicked, not to the past, not to home, but forward. To whoever built this, the ones who made this. If he ever met them, he would— "This," he muttered. "This is why you burn it all down, uncle." He raised his gun and fired. George, too. The Morlocks who were tending this hell like a garden fell first. The cacophony of weapons fire and the light from their muzzle flashes in the dim halls of the Morlock stronghold was hard to bear. When George's smoking weapon had emptied, he didn't reload. He picked up a fallen warrior's axe and began felling Morlocks with a burning vengeance. The spray of blood covering this good man had turned his visage into that of a ghoul, with no intention of stopping his rampage. He began hacking at the larval Morlock pods until he had to turn his attention to the Morlocks, who rushed to defend them. Fira rushed in, shadowed by Husker. Her blade flashed as it caught a leaping Morlock and almost cut it clean in two. Husker's axe had an odd hammer-like end behind the blade, and he smashed a clawing fiend squarely on the top of the head, red spray painting his leather armor. Alex's sidearm, its report so much louder in the cavern, and the screams of injured and dying Morlocks confirmed his continued contribution. It was carnage. When the raid finally broke, there was no cheering. They slaughtered every Morlock they could find. It was simply necessary. Alex saw a now familiar Morlock figure move shiftily and fired twice. A scream, but the sound didn't sound like the thud of lead on flesh. It sounded like metal on metal. The Morlock lay there, bleeding from a head wound. But it wasn't the wound that was remarkable. It was the Morlock's oddly more human physiology and obviously advanced tech that covered one side of the top of its head. Alex raised his weapon to finish the job, but Sandar halted him, announcing, "Not yet, cousin. This Morlock is talking to someone." Alex was confused. "Can they talk? I don't hear anything." "No, they're little more than animals, and this one isn't with words." Sandar tapped the side of his head. Alex realized he meant telepathy. "What's it saying?" "Facility breach," monotoned Sandar. Something about failure to meet quota, and an urging not to return again. Alex was about to ask Sandar to try and interrogate it, but before he could speak, Hasker appeared, put a boot on the Morlock's chest, and with one impossibly strong snatch, ripped the device off the Morlock's head. It came away in a shower of sparks and blood, evidently having been fused to the Morlock's skull to some degree. The Morlock spasmed and died. Alex was shocked to an appalled silence at the sudden loss of an intel source and the casual brutality. Hasker, seeing his face, looked vaguely contrite. "Oh, had you claimed this trophy?" He tossed the technology to Alex, who stood looking dumbly at the bloodied device in his hands. "Apologies. Well fought today, blood of George." He looked at Sandar for the first time, like an equal. "You also, son of George." They returned to the birthing pits, and once more were appalled by the sacks hanging from the walls, the larvae, each one a translucent sac, slick with moisture, suspended by ropes of sinew and tethered to the pit's rancid infrastructure. Inside, blue limbs twitched. Some sacks pulsed. Others looked like they might be ready to hatch. Not infants, not children. These foul beings didn't have a juvenile state as such. These nightmare chrysalids would become fully grown Morlocks, just the next wave of terror already gestating. George didn't hesitate. He smashed the first one with the axe, the fluid spraying. Alex followed. Fiera's blade made quick work of the next. No orders or quarter was given. Everyone nearby did their duty. They weren't ending lives. They were exterminating merciless predators who forcibly impregnated or ate humans, worthy only of eradication, like their sires. When they had completed their grim task, they finally stopped to take stock. The captives were freed or mourned, and the Humoi gathered outside the pit in bruised silence. Wounds were bound, dead were counted. Some, too far gone to be saved, were granted the mercy of a quick death. The women rescued from the breeding pit were evaluated. The ones whose minds were broken from the horror of it all would be sent to live with the riverfolk Eloi. Their latent psionics helped such women attain a measure of peace. Those few women who remained more or less psychologically intact, usually the ones only recently captured, would be reintegrated back into Humoi society. But the nightmares would always be with them. Fiera sat on a boulder, head bowed, cleaning her blade. Her hands shook. No one mentioned it. For indeed so did just about everyone else's. Even the mighty Hasker's hands shook. He who had so skillfully and courageously wielded his battle-axe. Out of all present, Sandar alone felt no post-battle adrenaline dump. George had the look of a man needing left alone to his thoughts. Alex weighed taking the trouble to tell him about the strange Morlock with the advanced technology, but seeing George's fragile state thought better of it. He brought him a helmet filled with water and a rag. George wordlessly refused it, but caught sight of his reflection in the water and took the proffered bowl. He didn't mind their blood on his hands, but he wouldn't have it on his face. Weena wouldn't have allowed it. Sandar, ever practical and logical, suggested sending requests for supplies to the river folk, along with the freed, traumatized Humoi and Aloy women who needed psionic healing. George normally would have arranged these affairs, but Sandar took this upon himself, seeing his father's troubled state. This was agreed to and actioned. He wasn't aware of it, but he had earned himself a new respect among the Humoi with his powerful contribution to the battle. He didn't particularly feel an abundance of care for his own people or the Humoi, but he preferred to be useful to whichever situation he found himself in. He simply never felt part of anything except maybe his own family. Alex felt befouled by the whole experience. He sought the nearest river and stripped to the waist, rinsing blood and filth from his skin. His arms, lean but strong, flexed as he scrubbed grime from his vest, then his arms and chest. A few old scars were written on him, not many, but enough to mark a life familiar with danger. Uncle Charlie's training and field trips were no walk in the park. He scrubbed extra hard where Morlock blood had splashed him. Filthy animals. He could hardly believe they were part human. He ducked under, sluicing water over his head, then stood, water streaming down his back. From the tree line, Fira watched. Not deliberately at first, but her eyes lingered, longer than they should have. She told herself it was curiosity, practical appraisal, warrior-to-warrior appreciation. But it wasn't. It was heat, blood still singing from the fight. Her nerves were taut from adrenaline, from survival, and she had to admit, this strange man had saved her life. Her gaze traced the line of his shoulders, the taper of his spine, the way his hands worked through his hair. She inhaled, sharp, controlled. She turned before her gaze could drop lower, before it could become something else. Shame, perhaps. And yet, as she walked back towards the campfires, her jaw was set tighter than usual, her eyes a little brighter. Later, there was no ceremony for the Morlocks, no rites, no words except imprecatory curses. They let them rot where they fell, in their filth, in their pits, beneath the weight of their own depravity. No one would raise a stone, no one would light a flame for them. Not here, not ever. Efforts were made to burn the entire pit tunnel network and all its infernal contents. Smoke rose from its vents long into the late afternoon. The dead of the Humoi, though, they were carried home with honor. A quiet procession, solemn, heavy. Each warrior lifted by kin or comrades, laid upon biers of woven boughs. Not a word spoken, only the soft creak of wood and the rhythmic crunch of boots over earth. Far from the Morlock hell, beneath open sky and clean air, the pyres would be built. Tall, clean, pure. The flames would take them swiftly, sending smoke and embers rising high, back to the earth, the sky, the endless turning of life. Ashes to soil, spirit to wind, a fitting end. The Morlocks could have their own kind for carrion. The Humoi, the people, would be returned to the earth and sky with dignity. That night, the victory hearth burned high. Humoi warriors dragged forward their prizes. Morlock weapons, scavenged tools, twisted bits of armor. The heads of particularly large or fierce Morlocks were dumped unceremoniously into the dirt, a grim but long-standing tradition. Cheers rose with each offering. Spitted meat and riverfolk fish roasted over open flames. Ale, brewed from special fermented roots, passed out in flagons or horns. Alex stood back from the circle of celebration, arms folded, gaze distant. Part of him was bemused at people who celebrated so soon after such losses, but he reasoned it to be a way of making such losses mean something, to make it worth it. His eyes caught on a few particular Morlock relics, and something about them nagged at him. Pieces of metal shaped with unusual precision. A blackened box with faint traces of copper wiring. Another object that looked remarkably like a circuit board, but with elements he didn't recognize. He recalled the trophy taken from the head of the last Morlock and retrieved it. He rinsed it with water from a bottle and turned it over in his hands, examining it. His engineering mind screamed at the impossibility of what he saw. "George," he said quietly, waving him over. "Look at this. We took this thing from the head of a Morlock. Sander said the creature was in contact with someone." "Morlocks can't communicate as we do. What do you mean?" George clearly doubted what he had just heard. "If you don't believe me, believe Sander. He seemed convinced he overheard the Morlock use telepathy to warn someone not to return to that pit," replied Alex, handing him the strange Morlock headpiece. "I think this is what enabled such a feat." George turned it over in his hands, squinting at the strange technology under the firelight. "The innards are amazingly intricate. Metal, yes. Copper, maybe. But what are you seeing that I don't?" Alex considered his response. How best to explain advanced technology to a Victorian mind? This tech was obviously far beyond even his own 21st century, and he only had an inkling of its basics. Then an idea began forming plain on his face. "We need to get you up to speed, fast." George saw in Alex the look of another scientist's train of thought, and nodded, gaze hardening. "You're thinking a field trip?" "Exactly. Back to my century. There's things you need to learn. I can give you a frame of reference. This tech is beyond us both, but my slightly more advanced understanding of things can help you catch up. And after that pit fight, I can see the need to stock up. More ammo at the very least." George exhaled slowly. "It'll do me good to get out of here for a bit." His mind still lingered on the horrors of the Morlock pit. It didn't take the psychologist that Alex wasn't to see the man needed a change of scenery. When George announced his intention to leave for a short time with Alex, Fira was less than thrilled. "You're leaving?" she said, her tone flat but her eyes betraying something else, something unsettled. "Now? Just for a few hours." George reassured her, patting her shoulder like a fond uncle. "For you, it'll feel like I've only stepped away." She crossed her arms but said nothing more. Her gaze drifted, not to George, but to Alex. Alex caught the glance but said nothing. They made ready to go. Fira and Sander insisted on accompanying the two time travelers to Alex's machine and would wait until they returned. The Time Rider remained where Alex had first hidden it, tucked away beyond the tree line. Under moonlight, Alex and George clambered into the craft, settling into the two front seats. George marveled as the screens and indicators lit, and the craft lifted on its cushion. The engine spun up, the copper coils lit. The temporal observation window, the big blue bubble, shimmered into place around them. With a pulse of light and the familiar gut lurch, they disappeared from the year 802,720. The landing was rougher than Alex preferred. The Time Rider emerged near Charlie's property with a bone-rattling jolt. George staggered out of the cabin, leaning against a tree until his stomach settled. "Your machine has all the grace of a drunken elephant." "We're working on that," Alex said with a grin. Inside the house, George marveled at the changes a century had wrought. Alex activated a jug-like article connected to some sort of electric supply and sat him down in front of a book on its side. He opened it. It had a screen and an array of buttons like a typewriter, but flat. Alex explained that it was wirelessly connected to the sum total knowledge of all mankind. Astounding. George spent long minutes staring at Charlie's battered laptop, his fingers hovering uncertainly over the keys until Alex showed him how to navigate. Alex set a steaming mug of tea down in front of his uncle. "Is this what I think it is? You glorious man, it's been 20 long years since—" He sipped, heedless of the scalding liquid. It appeared to be an almost religious experience. "I'm going to miss this again." He sighed. "What are these?" picking up small, round discs from the saucer. "Ginger snaps. Thank me later," Alex declared with a grin. "I'll be back soon, Uncle. Charlie had a man at the shooting range a town over. He can fix me up with enough to keep us in Morlock repellent for a good while if I grease his palms well enough." Alex showed his uncle a few more things to look at and left. The internet was a revelation. 125 years of history in review since his own time. Diagrams, circuit layouts, instructional videos. George absorbed it all with an inventor's awe and ability to assimilate new information. A couple of hours passed. Alex returned. "So much progress," he whispered, eyes wide. "So much knowledge. And yet—" "Yeah," Alex said. "And yet," as George continued to devour diagrams, electronics manuals, and ginger snaps, Alex busied himself in the corner, double-checking the rifles and slipping spare ammunition into pouches. Occasionally, George would glance up, muttering incredulously about modern battery technology or integrated circuits. He also assimilated much theory he had missed out on. Alex walked over and took a look over George's shoulder. "Now, you know how my era's version of modern technology is constituted? Communications, automation, computation. You can see basic similarities with the tech we found at the pit. It's my opinion the device we removed from the Morlock's head was some kind of amplifier that allowed it to communicate telepathically with parties unknown. You all seem to say they seem incapable of verbal communication, but this one didn't look entirely Morlock. Without taking you on another field trip, I want to propose to you the idea of an evolved Morlock, or a genetically modified one. We have 21st century technology, though still its infancy, capable of modifying genetics to maximize potential. I wanted to bring all of this to your attention at the time, but you were a man with singular focus and a need for solitude that needed no announcing." "Ah," he sighed. "Apologies, nephew. This is a turn of events I should have been ready to pay attention to. Forget it, Uncle, I understand. But so you see," Alex explained after some time, "the Morlocks being in possession of this level of tech creates somewhat of a the friend of our enemy is our enemy problem. I suppose, we may not be alone in the 800,000th century." "Agreed," George concurred, reluctantly. "I never considered that their wretched sirens' calls were anything other than a device of their own making, but the complexity of the hardware we recovered seems to suggest a civilization even more advanced than your 21st century. Psionic control. It is beyond your era's ability, yes?" "Control?" "Oh, quite. Best we can manage is a really catchy tune and some bright colors," Alex quipped. George took a reverent drink of his tea. "I suspect the technology belongs to the people who created the Morlock and Eloi subtypes. I suggest that if we're going to perform the tomfool thing that is time travel, you should pay a visit to the era where the creators of our friends and foes came from. I remain hopeful that the unspeakable things we saw in that pit were not the original intentions of these advanced people." Alex wasn't so sure, but he kept his counsel. It seemed right to allow George to exercise some optimism. Once George had finished his tea, Alex closed the laptop. "Come on. One more stop." George followed him out to the car, but not before insisting on one more cup. Alex laughed and dug out a travel mug. The drive into London was silent for a time, both men wrapped in their own thoughts. George marveled at the busy roads and fast pace of life around him, but other things weighed on his mind. As he retreated further into his thoughts, the streets felt different, smaller, quieter. Time itself seemed thinner here, knowing what they both now knew. When they pulled up outside the old Wells estate, the battered, crumbling home that had once defined generations, George stepped out slowly. His eyes scanned the sagging roofline, the boarded windows, the way ivy had clawed over the brickwork. He mentally compared it to the newer, prettier homes up and down the long avenue, and the house became the anachronistic avatar of himself in his mind. "I don't belong here," he said softly. Alex glanced over. "Yeah, I figured you'd get there eventually." "For what it's worth, me neither. It's not just the century," George continued, voice quiet but firm. "It's all of it. This world, this era, the rules it follows. I don't fit. I never did. My time's not in the past anymore. It's forward." Alex softly nodded. "I'm starting to feel the same way, George. This era, mine, has no interest in pausing to preserve the best of what came before. It races toward the future, and any tradition or reality that gets in the way gets blown out of the way pretty quickly. Whole generations, aimless, groundless. I never fit in." "Well," mused George, "no one's in a better position than you to make their own future." "Maybe." Alex considered. "That seems too big picture for now, though. Let's just do what we came here to do, and we can gaze at our navels some more later." They retrieved the last of the pitchblende, George handling the shielding with a craftsman's reverence, Alex with a cautious engineer's eye. Then, without further ceremony, they locked it down and turned back toward Charlie's, where the Time Rider waited. George didn't look back. Back at the farmhouse, they secured the pitchblende in the reactor vault. Alex loaded several more filled jerry cans for the combustion engine. As George strapped in, Alex rummaged through the pantry and, on return to the vehicle, tossed a giant box of tea bags into his lap. "For morale," Alex quipped. George laughed, a tired, honest laugh that lingered as the Time Rider lifted on its cushion of air. The copper coils spun up, the quartz rods flickered, the fan screamed into resonance. The Time Rider became enveloped inside its characteristic temporal field and slipped into the time stream. Turbulence shuddered through the frame. Static crackled along the viewport. The observation window pulsed erratically. And then, a shadow. A shape, indistinct, silent, passed overhead. A dark outline against the kaleidoscopic swirl of the time stream. "Did you see that?" Alex snapped, hands tight on the controls. George squinted, leaning forward. I did. Something, yes, that's new." The shadow was gone as quickly as it appeared. The turbulence eased. George glanced sideways. "Never happened to my old girl." "Well, that's reassuring." Alex muttered, checking every gauge twice. With a juddering pulse, they slipped back into the year 802,720. When the craft reappeared near the Humoi camp, the sun was already beginning to rise. Alex checked the atomic clock. 5 hours gone, he muttered. For them, anyway. George observed, "You're better at re-entry than I was." Alex acknowledged the praise. "Thanks, but the computer does half the work for me. And now I can say that to a 19th century man and have him understand what the hell I'm talking about." "Indeed, your craft is much less elegant than mine, but far more capable," George admitted. "Thanks, but hardly original. I stand on the shoulders of a giant." "Enough flattery. If you're as well as me, you believe a job well done is its own reward," declared George. "Couldn't agree more," Alex said. "Go ahead, I'm getting something bigger than this sidearm. The Glock puts down Morlocks easily enough, but I had to double tap a few last time. I won't underestimate their ferocity again." He squeezed to the rear. Alex flipped open the armory case and reached for the M4. The rifle lay nestled beside a stack of magazines, matte black and cold. He lifted it, checked the chamber, clear, and gave the bolt a sharp pull before letting it snap home with a metallic bite. No rust, no dust, still clean. He thumbed the selector to safe, slid a mag into the well until it clicked, and slapped it once for certainty. Then he slung the rifle over his shoulder and stepped out of the Time Rider and locked it up. He placed the netting and conscripted nearby broken branches so as to complete the camouflage. Fira and Sandar waited at the edge of the clearing. Her scowl at seeing George leave had faded to something else entirely upon seeing him return safely. Her gaze lingered a moment longer on Alex than necessary, and then they all headed back into camp. Before he could say a word, the camp's atmosphere shifted. Something near the victory hearth crackled with guttural metallic noise. Alex's eyes narrowed. "What the hell?" The group hurried further into camp. One of the Morlock relics, the one ripped from the strange Morlock's skull, an oddly shaped half-helm, its surface etched with unfamiliar runes, was speaking. The voice that spilled from it wasn't natural, artificial, guttural, deep and strange, like something mimicking language but failing to hide the machinery underneath. Each syllable buzzed with distortion, like bad radio through broken speakers. Some Humoi recoiled in alarm, others shouted for it to be destroyed immediately. A few fell to their knees, invoking protection of themselves with unfamiliar hand gestures, as if warding off evil. "Morlock magic!" someone yelled, and raised a rock to crush it. Alex and George exchanged a glance, then surged forward. "No!" Alex shouted, holding up a hand. "We might need this. Don't destroy it." George's eyes locked on the faint copper wiring Alex had spotted earlier. "There's technology in this," he explained, voice tight. "Something, is speaking through this." Together, they convinced the Humoi elders that the artifact needed study, that understanding the Morlock's new tricks might save lives. After long discussion, the council agreed, but only on the condition that the Welleses continue their war against the remaining pits nearby, and that any future Morlock technology recovered would be handed over to George and Alex for examination. "Agreed," Alex said, shaking the elder's hand. George only nodded, already lost in thought, staring at the artifact as if it held answers to questions he hadn't dared ask until now. That night, long after the fires burned low, Alex lay restless in his tent. Sleep eluded him. He didn't miss the 21st century, but being there again was jarring. Flashes, too, of the pit's horror lingered behind closed eyes, and the unanswered question of who was calling the Morlocks was annoying him no end. The sudden rustle of the door flap made him startle, but it wasn't an enemy. Fira ducked inside without a word, eyes sharp in the moonlight. "Lie still," she said simply, slipping down beside him, her back pressed against his. Her tone brooked no argument. "For warmth? Nothing else. Don't mistake it for more. Her presence most welcome." The heat of her body bled into his, grounding him more than he wanted to admit. Sleep finally took him. When dawn broke, she was already gone. Outside, Sandar stood near the tree line, silent, gaze distant, but very much aware. He'd watched her slip out at the first bird song, and standing there, hands folded loosely behind his back, Sandar wondered, for the 100th time in recent days, why humans found it so difficult to speak their minds. Somewhere, in a distant future past, a message was flashed and read, "Subterra Colony 77 Delta. All contact lost. Temporal psionic data link severed. Audio prompt unsuccessful. Conclusion. Total loss of retrieval opportunity by means of local subterran assets. Assume loss of all units, including the inserted master unit." The reader swiped the message hologram away, deleting it. "It matters not," the reader thought. "We need only one of you, and we will have you. You belong to us. You will service us. And then, you will die."